It doesn't matter what happens to you in life. It matters what you choose to do with it.
I have a special treat for you today. I was able to interview Andrea Merriman, the ex wife of the so called Mormon Madoff, Sean Merriman, about her incredibly wild experience being married to a man for almost 20 years, not knowing that he was a criminal and a Ponzi schemer and had been lying to her the entire time, and she had no clue. You'll want to stick around for this. This is a fantastic interview with Andrea Merriman. Let's get to it.
If you're new here, I am Annette Lyon, USA Today best-selling author of the suspense novel Just One More and a whole bunch of other stuff. Also award-winning author, former editor, a whole bunch of other things. Here we discuss true crime often, but not always, where it intersects with religion. And then we have chocolate on the side because you gotta have something sweet in the middle of all the bitter. I have opinions. I rant. That's what we do here. We respect all faith traditions and those with no faith traditions. That includes my faith as well. A quick reminder to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and helps other people find this kind of content who would be interested in it. Ready? Let's go.
For those who don't know your story or even what a Ponzi scheme is, so I'll give my little explanation for what a Ponzi scheme is, and you can clarify.
Yeah.
Like, kind of do that. My understanding essentially is that a Ponzi scheme is when investors are giving money into the program thinking it's an actual investment financial benefit, that they were saving up money. In reality, it's not being invested, and anyone taking money out is just getting money from the pool, but it's being supported by any new donations coming in. So eventually you get the pyramid, and the whole thing eventually crumbles because there's nothing supporting it. Is that sort of?
Yes. I mean, some say that Social Security is a form of legalized Ponzi scheme because you have new people paying money in that the old people are getting out, but there's really no money to be had. So basically, a Ponzi scheme is where investors put money in a fund for a specific purpose, but the fund manager is taking that new money and paying previous and older investors off with it. So to continue going, you have to have that constant new influx of new money coming in to pay the older and previous investors off. Meanwhile, in the case of my ex-husband, he's living a very nice life off of all the money that gets invested.
You had no idea whatsoever until he confessed everything. So you've been married for, what was it?
Just about, yeah,
about 20 years.
Right at my 20th anniversary time.
Oh, goodness.
I was married in August, and my divorce was final July 13th.
July.
So 2 weeks before my 20th anniversary, I was single.
Wow. 4 kids, and you're on your own. So you're living this great life. He even sends you on a trip to New York, if I recall correctly, just days before all of this goes down.
Yes.
And then he calls you and says, I need to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in some of the documentary things that I saw, it sounded like he said to come home, but on one of your TikTok videos, it said it was to a mobile home or RV that you owned. Is that correct?
Yes, it was an RV or motor
An
home.
RV.
I was out running errands one day. He called me and asked what I was doing, said he wanted to spend time with me, asked me to come home. And so I turned the car around to go and meet with him and spend time with him. And he said, well, meet me in the kitchen of the motorhome, which I thought was a little bit odd, but he was always working on a project or doing something. So I thought, well, maybe he's cleaning the motorhome or something. So I went in, sat down at the kitchen table of the motorhome, waited for him to finish a phone call he was on. And then he sat down and I'm like, hey, what's up? And he goes, well, that's what I've asked you here to meet me about. And then without any preface, anything, he just said, my company, Market Street Advisors, is a sham, and it has been from the very beginning. Every day when you thought I was going to work as a money manager, I actually have been running a Ponzi scheme. And I didn't even quite know what a Ponzi scheme was, although I had heard of Bernie Madoff. And I think his Ponzi scheme had been discovered a year or two before this, but I was focused on my family. I think my mom had passed away. Like, I wasn't that into the news. I was doing my own life, so I didn't really pay much attention to it. But basically, I learned my husband, that I thought was a good man, a good father, good husband, good Christian, successful businessman, was actually a con artist running, a Ponzi scheme, committing crimes. And the saddest part was, he had been for years and no one knew it. It wasn't just me that didn't know it, but he had an accountant. The accountant never caught on. He had an employee. The employee never caught on. He had been audited by the IRS. They never caught on. His very wealthy clients, but also some of them were very sophisticated investors. They'd never caught on. It was
Wow.
a crime that impacted so many people, destroyed so many lives, and no one ever caught on. There's a lot of people over the years that have said, you are too smart to not have known what was going on. Well, thank you for the compliment, but no,
Yeah.
I wasn't any smarter than anybody else for this particular thing.
He's also very smart that he was able to pull this off for so long and fool so many people. Why do you think he came forward when he did? Do you think was the audit maybe spooking him, or did he think it was going to come out soon anyway?
In the beginning, I just answered that question by telling people what he told me, because I was trying to look for the good and continue to trust all that stuff. But he said he came forward when he did. And keep in mind, he came forward. There wasn't a government authority that caught on to it and investigated him and secretly, or suddenly busted him. He walked in to the government and handed them a case, a crime they had no idea was happening. The reason they didn't know it was happening is because he was not a licensed financial advisor. So he was an ordinary citizen, technically, who set up this investment scheme and told people about it, and they put money into it, and then were shocked when something horrible had happened with the money. But when you're not licensed, when you're not registered, there's no oversight. And maybe that's something,
Wow.
that's what I'm hoping maybe to help educate people on, is there's no oversight if you're giving money to someone who's not licensed, not registered. And I didn't know that either. I just thought he was running a business. I didn't realize nobody would be checking up on it. But the reason he said that he came forward and told what had been going on was, he said after 15 years, he just couldn't take the guilt anymore. Now, the timing of finally feeling guilty is a little interesting, because it was after the 2008 economic crisis. Ponzi schemes were collapsing. There were lots of investments collapsing. And again, to keep a Ponzi scheme going, you've got to have that new money. Well, people aren't putting new money in. They're wanting to know where their money is and get their money back. So
Yeah.
that could have had something to do with it as well. Not to mention, running a Ponzi scheme, the FBI told me, takes an incredible amount of work. Like, one of the investigators pulled me off to the side once and said, I know this is horrible, and I know this is bad. I know your life is destroyed, and I'm so sorry. And I know the lives of many other innocent victims have been destroyed too. He goes, but I can't believe what this man was able to do by himself, on his own, for so long, and no one ever had a clue. He said, you can't imagine the work it must have taken to do what he did. Just couldn't take the hard work anymore.
I wonder if, just because you've described him as a narcissist slash sociopath kind of individual, and so I wonder if going in on his own terms in some ways stroked his own ego, like, look guys, look how smart I am, you didn't figure it out.
Yeah, but also you get better time less time if you turn yourself in. So again, that narcissistic tendency in him. I mean, if he's going to turn himself in, let's do it in the best terms possible, the way that's going to help him the most.
If he hadn't turned himself in and cooperated, then it could have been 20 plus years. But because he did cooperate, he got 12 and a half-ish, something like that. And that was the maximum. Is that right?
It was more than the max. Supposedly,
so,
according to sentencing guidelines, he thought he was going to qualify for around 5 to 7 years. Now, there's a lot of things that are taken into account in the sentencing guidelines. How the way the fraud was committed, how many victims there were, the amount of money that was stolen. There's all kinds of things. And there's things you can do to, lessen what you qualify for. For example, if you call and confess to all of your victims, I think that gives you a little less time. So he made sure he did that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, all the things that he did, I'm sure were to try to help him out. But he went into this expecting 5 to 7 years, and he got 12 and a half. So he got more than the max, which I think is evidence of the severity of the crime or the damage to the victims or the testimony of the victims or a lack of empathy, maybe someone, felt they saw. I don't know. I wasn't there. I divorced him and was not at his sentencing, but there's something that goes on if you get more than the max.
He didn't want you to claim yourself as a victim because if he got more than 50 victims, then that would jack up his sentence. And I guess he was right on that edge. So were you officially labeled a victim in the case?
No, I wasn't.
So how did that feel by itself? Because you clearly were.
Well, very few people, or there are many people, I should say, who don't think I'm a victim. A lot of people are like, well, you enjoyed the life he provided, so you're guilty too, or you're not a victim. You had a nice life on the backs of innocent people. Yep, all of that is true. The key is I did not know. So I thought I was married to a successful money manager, a successful businessman. Everybody thought he was. He had this reputation of everything he touched turned to gold, and people trusted him with their money, knowing he was an ordinary citizen, unlicensed, unregulated, and they still felt it was a good investment to go with him. His statements that he sent every month were really good statements, very official looking. I've shown them to, financial services professionals. And although they are appalled at the crimes committed by my ex-husband, one of them, well, many, but one in particular is like, you got to give him credit. Those were great statements.
He faked it well. He confesses at the motorhome. And then you talked about your initial reaction, of course, is shock and horror. And you're thinking, well, at least the house is paid off. And he goes, no, you don't understand. Everything is gone. So you made 2 phone calls after that. Tell me about that.
Well, I tried to call my sister and I couldn't reach her. I don't know if the line was busy or she wasn't home. That was back in the day when you could actually get a busy signal. And then, so my second call was to a very close friend who had become like a sister to me over the years. Her parents actually were investors of my ex-husband. So in that horrifying moment when I found out everything that had happened, I also said, oh my gosh, but what about so-and-so's money? My friend's parents' money. He assured me the money was okay. So that's what I thought, and it wasn't. So I called that friend. She said, I don't know what you should do either, but we determined together that I should run and try to get some money from the bank. Even though I'd been told all the assets had been frozen, I don't know. And it's hard to describe. You feel like a cornered animal and you feel like you have to survive, especially when you have kids. So I ran to the bank to where I had my own account. It was funded with a small life insurance policy I'd received when my mom passed away. So it was my own money. Maybe Maybe I didn't think that would be part of the seizure because it wasn't tied to him. Maybe I was just desperate. I honestly can't remember, but I ran and tried to access some money and got a couple thousand out of the bank from that, whatever the max was that they'd let me take out through the ATM. And then went home because I didn't know where else to go and what else to do.
Over the next couple of what that was March 19th, is that correct?
March 18th,
18th.
2009 was the day I found out everything had been a lie.
And then, yeah, so between then and July, when the divorce was final, he was still at home.
Yep.
And people go, well, what? Why was he still there? I've watched your video, so I know why, but how about you tell the viewers?
There were a lot of reasons why. Believe me, it was not my preference. The moment he told me and the moment I comprehended what he had done, it was like living with a stranger. Like, he didn't look the same to me. Frankly, I was a little afraid. I was afraid to go to sleep at night, wondering if I was going to, be murdered or something in my sleep. Like, he was that much of a stranger instantly. If I never comprehended this, what else could he have done? But I determined in those very early moments, I kind of felt like I'd had my shot at life, my shot at happiness, and my role, my responsibility was to my children and doing everything that I thought would help them and be the best for them. And I had a 3-year-old, I had a 3rd grader who were going to be without a dad for who knows how long. I thought, if it's better for them to be around their dad for a few more weeks or months, I didn't know how long it would be, then I can suck it up and do it for them, because it's not about me. It's about them. I also thought, if he doesn't stay with me, he's going to go impose on someone in the area. One of my friends, and all my friends had kids and families, and I didn't want that. I didn't want to make it worse for anyone else. So that was another reason. As hard as it was to have him around, it was an opportunity for a little bit of closure, I guess, just to be able to ask questions and go back over 20 years and go, well, what about this conversation? What about this story you told? What about this investment you made? What about this? And a chance to at least ask a question. Did I necessarily trust the answers he gave me? No, but at least I could ask questions. And I, along with everybody else, had a lot of questions. So there were a lot of reasons I let him stay, but let me promise you, not one of them was because I thought it was best for me, or because it was what I wanted, or because I loved or wanted him in any way. That died the instant I found out I was married to a criminal.
Amen to that. Some of the stories that you told, that when you start seeing the signs of who he really is, and that start picking up on those things and realize that some of those things had been around all along, but you didn't know what they meant. Not red flags like, oh, he has a Ponzi scheme, but things like, tell us about the story with the glass of water on Father's Day.
Oh, so
I think that was so telling.
Yeah. So you have to keep in mind, I met him back in the 1980s, and maybe I lived life in a bit of a bubble, but I was raised by really good people. My dad, my uncles, my grandpa, everybody I knew were like good, genuine people. It didn't dawn on me at such a young age that I would come in contact with a narcissist or a sociopath. And I don't know that I necessarily even realized what narcissism was. It definitely was not something that was openly talked about back in 1985, 86, 87, to my knowledge. So I saw little things from the very beginning, but they're all just little isolated incidents. And to me, I took it more as, wow, he has an imperfection. He's not perfect. Well, who is perfect? But looking back, what I know now and being able to add up 20 years of little instances, I see it in a very different light. If only we all had the benefit of living our present with 20 years of hindsight, we would just be very different people. So one of the things that kind of became a private joke between us was, it's all about Sean. Now, knowing that it really was, it's not funny to me anymore. But at the time, I just thought, you know what? He's a little bit of a self-centered person. There are a lot of self-centered people in the world who are still good people and they're not criminals, but maybe they're a little bit more selfish than other people. So I just always kind of thought that. But one thing that just really brought it all to a head for me was on Father's Day of 2009. So the crime had been revealed. I was sitting in the kitchen at the kitchen table, again, the scene of many unique experiences, working on some paperwork. And he was in the kitchen making toast. And he had this weird quirk that the second toast came out of the toaster, he had to put butter on it so it would melt. So the toast pops up and he can't just walk to the toaster from where he was. He had to like leap up and run to grab it. And in the process of that, he didn't quite get his glass of ice water set down levelly on the table. He didn't set it flat on the table. And so he's leaping up to butter his toast, and his big glass of ice water pours all over the table, my paperwork, me, the floor. Now, it's not like I was really speaking to him, even though he was living with us. So I just calmly got up and I went and got a rag and started wiping up the spilled water. And as I was doing that, my third grader said, "What happened?" And I said, "Oh, your dad just spilled his water. No big deal." Like I wasn't mad. I just was cleaning it up. And when I explained that, thing one, that's what I call him, said to me, "My water spilled itself." Now, that's ridiculous. Water can't spill itself. I wasn't going to let him get away with it anymore, knowing what I then knew. So I corrected that. And my poor third grader, who was so traumatized, he probably, out of everybody, got the worst of it. He wasn't old enough to understand, and he was too young to understand certain things. So I remember him saying to me, after thing one argued with my explanation and I corrected it, and then I was done. I wasn't going to sit there and fight in front of my kids. But I remember my little third grader said, "Mom, I think I'm going to have to side with Dad on this one." And it was just another, injustice. I mean, they were coming at me right and left back then. So I just kind of had to roll my eyes. I'm like, great. But the one consolation I had was I knew as soon as my divorce was final and he went to prison, I would be able to hopefully correct in my children any misperceptions they had about glasses of water and their ability to spill themselves.
Let's discuss basic physics, people.
Yeah.
And water is not alive and doesn't have a will. And the fallout on your kids was one of the hard things to listen to as well, and how you handled some of that. But then also how the neighbors then also responded with so much hatred and vitriol toward you. Like if you had the audacity to smile, "Oh my goodness, she's enjoying this." Like I'm trying to enjoy a moment with my 3-year-old. Pardon me for not always crying. But so that made me so upset. But thinking you had no money, you're living off of that cash that you got from the ATM. You're living off of the kindness of some friends who are trying to help and some congregation members and that kind of thing. But you're getting a lot of pushback from neighbors as well. That is just cruel. So what were some of the stories there that you recall that was particularly hard?
It's really interesting to me. I've thought about this a lot. Number one, I am not all about the money, and I never have been. I grew up with a lot of wealth, but somehow my parents were able to teach me that it wasn't about the money. I remember one time in my life growing up, I was cleaning out the china hutch, and I pulled out all my mom's china, and she had several sets, and I stacked all of the sets up in a big tall pile on a bar stool that the higher I was stacking it, it got a little bit wobbly and tippy. And my mom said to me, "Don't stack those up like that. It could tip over and all the dishes could break. And those are special to me." And of course I was young and I knew everything. And I'm like, "Oh, it'll be fine." And all of a sudden I saw it start to sway. It went shattering down all these precious treasures to my mom. And I felt so bad. I remember crying as I was picking up the pieces, and she was kneeling by me crying, picking up the pieces. And I said, I am so sorry. I should have listened. I'm so sorry. And my mom said, it's okay. It's just things. People are more important than things. And that's how I was raised. So, yeah, I enjoyed a nice life, but it was never about the money to me. It was always about people are more important than things. So, I've thought about how would I react if I were one of the neighbors, and I don't know what I would have done. I would have hoped I would have made better, different choices than my neighbors did. But it was a good lesson to me that going forward in the future, to turn the other cheek and forgive and make it about people, not things. So I was just stunned, having raised the way I was raised, to be faced with people that didn't have the same philosophy and just were filled with hatred. I still, to this day, 16 years later, just last month, heard from someone that basically said, you should have crawled out of that situation and gone and lived in a trailer and kept your head down in shame and embarrassment for the rest of your life. And I walked away from the whole thing going, the very fact that I am breathing and I have 4 kids who are living and breathing is a source of irritation to some victims and some people. For some reason, they think we should just have ceased to exist because we once had ties to a criminal. So my neighbors were very, very unkind. And I know some of them were victims and had losses, but some of them were not. They were just mad on behalf of the other neighbors. And it was strange to go from being in a neighborhood with people that I had thought were good people and good friends. I mean, one set of neighbors, they also happened to be victims, but they would always tell me I was just like a daughter to them and treated me and my kids like I was just like a daughter to them. Others were just really good friends. When their kids needed anything, when anything hard was happening in their life, they would send their kids over to the Merrimans for safety and for help. So to go from that to just on a dime being hated by those people and everyone else was really shocking. They all of a sudden took to like gathering and hosting parties up at the top of my driveway at my mailbox, making it very evident that this big gathering of fun was happening. But, we're excluded, which whatever, I don't care. When it snowed, instead of shoveling one another's driveways like we always had, they took all of the snow from all of their driveways. And we were in a remote area, on acreage with big, tall pine trees. My driveway was 1/4 mile long. I mean, we shoveled snow with equipment versus just a simple little snow shovel usually.
And this is Colorado, so there's a lot of snow.
And they piled all of the snow at the top of my driveway, blocking me in. It happened to have happened after the asset seizure, so I didn't even have a snow shovel left to shovel snow with. And I was out there with my oldest son with like chunks of cardboard that we found in the trash and a broom from inside the house, just trying to cut through this mountain of snow. And it was that heavy, wet spring snow. We couldn't do it. Thank goodness no one needed to go to the hospital or the ER while we were blocked in. Verbally accosting my children, running alongside the car when we came and went. One neighbor, a victim, even showed up on my front porch with a loaded gun ready to blow Sean and who knows who else away. But thankfully, he turned around and left without hurting anyone. And then one night, people broke into our home. I don't know who it was, but if I had to pick a suspect, I would say it was someone in the neighborhood, but even more terrifying not knowing who would be there.
The thing with the snow on the driveway that blew my mind was that takes a lot of effort to be that petty. Like if they just disliked you or hated you quietly, that's one thing, but to go out of their way to clear their areas, load up the snow, drive it to your area, and then arrange it in a way you can't get rid of it. That's a lot of effort for hate that is misplaced. That's so bizarre to me.
But it was the hardest time I've ever lived through. I will tell you the degree of stress it was. March 18th, I woke up weighing one weight. March 19th, I woke up 7 pounds less.
Wow.
Like, what kind of
Just
stress is someone under to lose 7 pounds overnight?
overnight.
And
That's
and it
wild.
just felt like, I mean, I was being as strong as I could, but I had a lot bearing down on me, facing me, and I think I was pretty fragile. I mean, if anyone said a kind word to me in that time, I think it probably made me cry. I just was living under so much hatred and so much stress and so much shock and so much horror. I remember the women in the neighborhood took to gathering at the top of my driveway, like standing all the way across it. And one day I came home and I was trying to go into my house in my driveway, and they were all standing there, and they stood there, and I'm in my car waiting, and they didn't move. They just all stood there and talked and didn't move. And of course, I didn't lay on the horn or anything, but I remember thinking in that moment, you women must trust me a lot. If you had any idea how fragile I feel right now, you would not in your right mind be standing in front of me when I'm in a car with my foot could so easily slip to the gas pedal. But you can't do things like that. And I really tried to be true to who I was and who I'd been taught to be, despite the hatred. So there were a lot of things I wanted to say, a lot of things I wished I could do. My kids too. They kept saying, I am so tired of these awful neighbors. We are going to egg the neighbors when we move. I said, oh, no, you're not. We are not going to stoop to that level. We will be who we are. And besides, we need to eat eggs, not waste eggs throwing them at people. Money's too short, and too short a supply. We can't waste our money that way.
Yeah, really. That's a good lesson in general, though. It's let's use our resources for ourselves and not waste them on pettiness and hatred. That's tell me about the story you told about your son and his birthday. You had no money for a birthday present, and then the neighbors got mad about this too.
They did, of course they did, and this one probably justifiably so. But I was a desperate mother, and I'm not making excuses for anything I said or did then or now. But I was in such shock and under so much stress and had nothing to my name and didn't know how we were going to live and how I was going to go on. My parents were both dead. I did not have a backstop that I could just go move home with my mom and dad. It was my son's 16th birthday, which I'd always thought was kind of a milestone birthday. I'd kind of planned ahead for it. And his birthday comes around and I don't have a thing I can give him. I decided that all I could give him was a memory. And one of the cars that we owned was an Aston Martin. And my oldest son happens to be a car guy, a car enthusiast. And so I said, all right, I told my ex-husband, we don't have anything to give him for his birthday. We're going to let him drive the Aston Martin. And to his credit, the criminal was like filled with horror. No, you can't do that. That's scheduled for seizure. I said, yep, but it hasn't been seized yet. And it's all I have at my disposal. I will give my son the memory of driving this car. He's waited his whole life to do this. He's going to drive the car. That's going to be his birthday gift. And we argued about it, but I didn't listen to anything he said pretty much by that point. And I said, and when he comes up the driveway, and it wasn't going to be this big drive, it was like drive, a little bit and turn around and come home. But I said, when you come up out of the garage at the top of the driveway, I will be there and I'm going to take a picture of him in that car. And that's his present, the drive and a photo memory. So he did that. And of course, we were watched like hawks. So the neighbors saw him driving the car, saw me taking a picture, and called and complained to the government that that had happened. And they called and said, why did you do that? I don't know if they were happy about it or not. I said, because it was my son's birthday and it was all I had to give him, and I would do it again. I was really not very sorry about it. And that's on me.
I wouldn't have been either. I
just was overwhelmed with everything and thought, this out of everything is not that big of a deal. But anyway, They told me not to touch or drive the car again. And they probably, if I remember right, came and got it the next day so that I couldn't do anything like that again, which I never would have. The only reason I did was the birthday. But until you've been a desperate mother with nothing to give a child for their birthday, and I wanted to mark that occasion, that, yeah, probably can't understand why I did it. And I know it wasn't the best choice, but I didn't care. So I took the heat.
And I think memories in general are a better gift than things anyway. So I'm with you on that one. You talked about guilt for that you felt, the misplaced guilt or whatever, but like I chose this dad for my kids and how I should have seen it. Even that you were frustrated over his infidelity, which we haven't mentioned yet. He had call girls and all of that. I was so thrilled though when he was like, well, you should be grateful that I used protection. I respected you enough. And then you called him out on that, like, oh, I'm supposed to thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you grapple at all then with getting over that guilt of like, it's not my fault. Yes, I had a good life. It's not my fault that this happened.
It's something that I think came with time. Things happen in life that we have to forgive. Some of those things include forgiving ourselves. So for a long time, I couldn't think back on the past, and I couldn't look at photos, and I couldn't reminisce, or didn't feel like I could talk about any of my experiences. And with time and counseling and all of that, I just learned that, you know what, you just have to let some things go. So it was a process to forgive him, process to forgive myself, process to forgive the neighbors and everyone, which I have done. I believe in forgiveness. I believe in trust. So as much as I live through this nightmare, and people always say, do you trust anyone again? Could you? And I'm like, I choose to, because I don't like the thought of a life where I can't trust people. So, yep. Do I know there's a possibility I'll get burned? Yes, but I choose to trust anyway. Same thing with forgiveness. I believe in forgiveness. I believe in forgiving everyone of everything. So I have worked to do that. And that was the one requirement I made of my kids. I said, I don't know what we're going to do, how we're going to survive, how we're going to live, but I know, one, we will forgive everyone. We have to. Not for them necessarily, but for us. And I think we've done a good job at that. We've moved on. We're living a happy life. And I think part of the reason we're able to do that is choosing to forgive.
That it is a journey and it's a decision. That's
a decision you have to keep making every time you find out a new lie or experience a new injustice or someone else it's an over and over thing. But I think that's what leads to peace and happiness and everything else that I want in my life.
One of your videos just several of them have hit my heart hard, but one of them was, anyone who feels like, well, how will anything be made right for me? And you said it might not ever be. And that's just something we have to come to terms with sometimes. That was intense, especially when another one you mentioned that your middle schooler at the time wished that they had Alzheimer's so they wouldn't remember.
Yeah, that was because my grader again.
Yeah, the memory is rough. I think that's what makes it hard to forgive, because we can't necessarily forget. And sometimes you maybe wouldn't want to, because then you leave yourself vulnerable. So wisdom and yet somehow forgiving, that's rough. Talk about the 3 things that you lost, physical items that were so meaningful. And those, as a mother, those hit me hard too, and as a woman. So one was, of course, the house, because that was where you brought your babies home to, and all the family memories.
And mark their heights on the wall.
And mark their heights on the wall. Yeah. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I had thought I would live and die in that house. And so I just had this vision my whole life of watching this one particular place that I marked their heights. And it was in a prominent spot. It's not like I was living in this great house hiding it. It was right there. It was a huge, important thing to me. And having to walk away and leave that was rough. Probably my next greatest record of our family was my car and all the dings and dents and scratches that had happened from
Yeah.
hauling kids here or there, their bikes or their hockey equipment, or conversations we'd had, or the many meals we as a family had driven and delivered to someone, or, just vacations, road trips, visits to grandparents that weren't alive anymore. So losing that second record of my family was rough. And then one was, just a thing, but a thing that I happen to love. So a painting. Art
Well,
lovers.
describe the painting.
It was by an artist, a French artist named Lermite. And it was just the color. Supposedly, according to art experts, it wasn't the greatest Lermite, but I loved it. That's why I bought it. And the color palette was just peaceful and beautiful. And it was a picture of women toiling in a field, harvesting hay. And I just used to always look at that and just kind of find a parallel to me as a woman and me as a mother, working and toiling and serving. And yeah, I was sad to lose that too, but oh well, it's just a thing.
But yeah, I love the fact that the house and the car, I mean, it was, if I remember right, you said it was a Lexus, so it was a very nice car, but it was also old, relatively
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah,
But the fact that it was the dings and the scuffs and the scrapes,
yeah.
because that was that was the dirt bike, that was the hockey sticks, that was the memories you made with your children, and evidence of that. It
What I
relate to
was
that.
missing was not the perfection of a beautiful home or a Lexus. It was the record of my family, and in particular, raising my kids, because that was my greatest joy. It was what I was engaged in.
You're an active Latter-day Saint, as am I, correct?
Mhm.
Still, yeah. And Thing One, as we referred to him, had been a bishop.
Uh-huh.
So what do you tell people who they say, well, I've lost my faith because my bishop should have known X, Y, or Z, or my bishop committed a crime or whatever. Therefore, none of this is real and all of that. And yet you still have your faith. So what would you tell people like that?
Faith is a very personal thing. And if I could figure out how to instill faith in everyone, I think I would master one of the secrets of the world. But I believe in faith in Jesus Christ, not faith in outcomes. So, regardless of how things are going to turn out for me, I find comfort. I get help. I feel access to spiritual power by choosing to have faith regardless of what happens. I think that's what the pioneers did. I think that's what good people of all faiths all over the world do when they have a hard time or have a loss or whatever. It's a choice. Faith is a choice, and choosing faith and holding to what I believe and trusting God no matter what is what works for me. And so I would just say, if your way's not working for you, try my way and see what happens. I've learned through all kinds of experiences that even when I feel alone, I never have been. And I think when we're choosing faith and trying to be good people, call it karma, call it whatever, you will be helped. You will not be alone. Now, is it all going to turn out the way it used to be? Not necessarily. Probably not. Is it all going to be fair? Maybe not, but it won't matter because you'll have peace. You'll know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You'll know who you are, and you can trust in that and just move forward. I think one of the big mistakes we make in hard times is getting stuck and choosing to wallow in the misery, wallow in the wrongness, wallow in the fact that that's not fair. Yeah, life isn't fair. Instead of intentionally looking forward. Now, I am at the point where I can look back now and see a lot of things and learn a lot of things. At the time, to get through it all, I didn't look back so much. Like when I moved and drove away, I purposely did not even look in the rearview mirror because I thought if I do it, I may not be able to keep moving forward. But I think that's how you do heal and do move forward. You keep focused on what's in front of you, not what's behind you. A very wise man named Thomas S. Monson once said the two most useless words in the English language were if only. And I'd heard him say that, and I'd believed it before all this happened. And so I just didn't allow myself to ask why or if only. I just had to keep my sights set on the future and where I needed to go and where I needed to be. And did I succeed at it all the time? No. Was it hard? Yeah. It was a big, long, hard slog. And I had my moments. I had a moment about 10 or 11 years into it after my big challenge when I had been working every single day for 10 or 11 years and still was struggling and still just painfully slow progress that, man, I felt like throwing in the towel some days and giving up my faith and whatever. But I sure am glad I didn't, because eventually, if you keep moving forward long enough, you get past it. And you're able to see the good and see how you were blessed and how you were helped, and to recognize all the gifts and blessings that you received, for me, from God, or from other good people, or miracles. Or so that's kind of where I'm at and why I did what I did.
That's honestly, that's inspiring and amazing, considering everything you've been through, and you've come out the other end. You have 4 kids. It sounds like they're all doing great. You've remarried. You have a great career. It's amazing where you're standing now. And I'm sure it's still hard at times. Two thoughts. So one, if you could go back and visit yourself on, say, March 17th of that year, or any time up to when you were, and what the divorce is being final, and when the feds completely cleared you in writing, which almost never happens, what would you tell yourself? If there's something you could go back and tell yourself from that time, what would you say?
One person gave me a message on March 8th. I think it was the 18th or the 19th, right in the beginning of this. And a friend called another friend who called me and said, so-and-so called me, and she wants me to tell you that she knows everything looks bleak and horrible, and it is awful, but that it's not going to end up quite as bad as you think in the end. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's nice to know, whatever, but I don't know how. Well,
how can you know? Yeah.
I thought I would end up living in a cardboard box under a bridge somewhere with 4 kids and 2 dogs. No car, no anything, that we'd be homeless and begging the rest of our lives. But no, I got a job, and we were poor, but we had a roof over our head and we had food to eat. So yeah, it never does end up quite as bad as you envision. So what I was told is another thing that I've learned, and I've always told people that. And the importance, again, of forgiving and moving on, not getting stuck in the hard thing, not letting other people take your future from you.
Only was it your neighbors that were turning against you, but that friend you called, who was basically a sister, she also turned against you. Even when you called her and told her what happened, that you knew nothing, she turned against you too. And so to me, that would, in the end, that would be one of those that would be hard for me to forgive. So that's amazing to me that you were able to go, okay, I forgive you too.
Well, that's part of forgiveness. You forgive people who don't forgive you. You forgive people who don't even think they've done anything wrong.
True.
It's just kind of, you just let things go so that they're not poisoning you.
So why did you decide to come forward with your TikTok account, which began in April, I believe, of this year? And it's gone very big. So why did you decide to tell the story now and in that way?
So it's really funny, because a couple of people have said, this happened 16 years ago. Get over it. Why are you talking about it? Well, I'm glad for them it's in the past, but honestly, ramifications or fallout or whatever have been every day for me since. And I continue to hear from hateful people every year since. I've continued to be asked to give speeches about it or be on podcasts or be on television shows or whatever. So it's not in the past. And my kids have now all grown up and they've become adults. So I felt a little freer to address all of my experience. And so I just was marveling, end of last year, first of this year. My gosh, it's been 16 years and people still are curious about this. They want to know about it. And so I was talking to some sharp young people that I said, I can't believe people are interested in this still. It's been so long. They said, oh, of course people are interested in this. And they said, you know, there's actually a niche for this now, true crime and women, all these things. And they said, you should tell the story on your own terms. Quit sitting there and waiting for people to ask you. And as I thought about it, TikTok didn't even exist when this happened. And so, and then I've noticed on TikTok, there are people saying, I wasn't even born when this happened. So there's a whole generation that needs to know it doesn't matter what happens to you in life. It matters what you choose to do with it. And so I just felt like, you know what, I'm going to put this thing out there on my terms, possibly for the final time, who knows, and tell it all and share my message and what I've learned and what I believed in the hopes that it helps someone else. And when this happened to me, I felt alone, that there was no one in the world other than maybe Ruth Madoff, but I didn't know who she was or where she was or how to reach her, who might know how I was feeling. And I thought, I am going to not keep my head down. I am going to talk about this, because if I can help anyone ever by talking about this, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to risk the hatred, willing to risk the nasty comments, willing to risk whatever in the hopes that it helps someone else. If I can help someone going through what I did, great. If I can help anybody going through a hard time, because hard times come to every life, I just wanted to put a message of resilience and pressing forward and choosing the right and doing what's right, no matter the wrong things that happen, and to hopefully show life can be good again and things can be good. There's always something good if you choose to look for it. That's what I think we need more of in the world. So that's why TikTok, and that's why now. And I have already heard from many people saying, you have given me the strength to do this. Wow. Okay, if you could do that, I can do this. Or women who said, I have been married to a narcissist for 30 years. You have given me the strength to free myself and heal.
Wow.
That's why I'm doing it. And all the kids out there that are like, I can't believe this. And I say, make sure you never make these choices that would lead to this for anyone. I think if we all could realize the extent of the consequences of some of the wrong choices we make, the far-reaching negative impacts of some of the poor choices that we make, we would be better people and choose differently. I don't know if thing one would have chosen to not be a criminal, knowing the damage and destruction he was going to cause to so many people, especially his own family. But maybe if he had, maybe he would have chosen differently. I don't know. So I'm out there trying to say, let's think about the consequences when we make our choices. And if hard things happen, let's pull, from some strong point within us and move forward and choose to rise above it anyway and keep living a good life. There's hope. Maybe that's what I'm trying to share. Hope. Faith and hope. Choose faith, choose hope, and you'll be okay in the end. Might not be wealthy in the end, might not be, but you'll have a good life.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I really encourage anybody who hasn't followed you yet to hop on TikTok and follow. You're just starting now to go into the whole backstory. You told pretty much the March 18th up to, the divorce being final and all of that. And now you're doing the backstory and hinting at like thing one's, let's say, colorful family history. You teased a little bit about a possible unaliving situation. You've mentioned Diddy. there's all kinds of wild things that I think that we have yet to hear about. And so
Yes,
I'm looking
there is more to come,
to-
and I'm slowly migrating to Instagram and YouTube as well. I'm going to be hitting all the platforms, trying to reach anybody I can with a message of, doesn't matter what happens to you in life, it's what you choose to do with it. And let's press on and be resilient and choose happiness.
I love it. You know what? I don't know how a better place to end than with that. So thank you so much, Andrea. This was great. Andrea
thanks for
Merriman is, I
having
think, an amazing and a powerful woman, and something we should all aspire to be. And I think her story is one of what true crime in some ways can aspire to become. So thank you again to Andrea for coming on, and make sure you check out her story on TikTok. It is a fascinating watch. You will binge the whole thing up to so far. And big stuff. Lots of new stuff coming down the pike. Be sure to check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Subscribe if you're new. Make sure you hit that like button. That really helps the algorithm, people to find this kind of thing if they're interested in it, as you might be. And yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. And if you don't have a comment itself, leave some chocolate emojis or your comfort food of choice. And until next time, go get some chocolate.